we get the return of Blast in chapter 202 of One Punch Man. Almost as importantly, on top of that, we finally get to see what happens to Flashy Flash from the end of chapter 201, where we saw that he was mere moments from accepting God's power unwillingly. Well, we get an immediate answer as to what happens at the very beginning of this chapter, and we kick off with this cover page of Tatsumaki. I know a lot of you readers just absolutely love the Tatsumaki and Fubuki cover pages. Any artwork created by Murata is completely accepted by me with open arms. Personally though, I prefer the action cover pages, like the ones with Saitama on them and stuff, but whatever, great cover page. So we pick up this chapter with something pretty surprising happening. We see that Sonic is straight up slashing right through the arm of Empty Void. Sonic of course managed to do this because Empty Void was all caught up with Flashy Flash, as we saw at the end of the previous chapter where he used the Shining God Cube to forcefully start the power granting process for Flashy. And the reason that Empty Void is so adamant about doing this is that we also learned over the last couple chapters that the whole entire purpose of the Ninja Village wasn't to create ninja assassins. That was kind of just a byproduct of it. It was mainly set up to be this farm for Empty Void to try and use the God Cube on all the ninjas that come through it, in hopes that even one of them is actually worthy of God's power. And from what we saw in Flashy Flash's flashback, there really hasn't been anybody that has been worthy, leading to a ton of dead bodies. While like many of us, Empty Void was completely surprised that Sonic was able to resist God's power, because we also saw that after hitting Flashy Flash with the cube, Sonic tried to help Flashy and then gets hit with the cube himself. I am generally surprised though that Sonic was chosen for the monsterification process by God, or at least by Empty Void, because at first I thought that he wouldn't be worthy, or at least God wouldn't deem that he's worthy. It seemed like at first Empty Void didn't want to waste his time with him, but I guess the only reason he even touched him with the God Cube to begin with is to get him away from Flashy Flash, and also maybe take out two birds with one stone, because in his mind I assume that he anticipated Sonic to be taken by God, and as soon as he wasn't deemed worthy he would just crumble into dust. Or if things work out, Sonic would become super strong and become a powerful ally of Empty Void's. It was kind of a win-win for him. And Sonic smugly points out that you can't fool his eyes. We then get taken to this little dream sequence that Sonic has that's supposed to be a parallel to the one that Flashy Flash had in the previous chapter, the one where it was God disguising as Sonic as a little kid, and it definitely had a much more serious tone versus this one, because in Sonic's dream sequence, he has these like cartoony looking monster cells cooking up a monster cell for him on the stove, much like he did with his monster cell like way back in the manga, which is why he isn't a monster now, because he cooked it. So weirdly enough, he's watching these monster cells as they're preparing another monster cell in the stove, even like seasoning it and flipping it, and even go as far as to prepare it for him on a plate. As they're tying the bib around his neck, one of the monster cells is saying, "Come eat. You've been brushed off by Saitama, left in the dust by Flash, and humiliated by that man. Are you okay with that? Aren't you the strongest genius ninja? Come become stronger from this, and let us show them how superior you are." So it seems much like the first time around, Sonic is getting convinced into eating this monster cell, and therefore accepting God's power, but surprisingly, and I think pretty comically, Flashy Flash just stabs it with an explosive kunai, and then the monster cell screams as it explodes. Like, dude could have just said no or flipped the plate over, but of course Sonic, being the over-the-top guy that he is, he had to do this. I don't know, I thought it was a pretty funny little detail. Let me know what you guys thought about this dream sequence in the comments though. And while you're there, subscribe if you feel like it. I cover One Punch Man every single time a chapter comes out. So yeah, anyway, moving on. We then cut back to reality where Sonic is thinking to himself, for some reason Saitama's strength is elusive, but through Flash I can see the ideal of strength that I should target, and if I can visualize it, then I can follow it. So pretty much what Sonic is saying here is that although he doesn't know the secret to Saitama's power quite yet, he saw firsthand what the potential of his own strength could be once he saw Flashy Flash using pure speed to defeat the Heavenly Ninja Party. If we remember back in that moment, he was thinking to himself that what he was witnessing was raw power using pure speed, meaning he might not ever be physically strong like Saitama, but in his eyes he can create an equal form of strength through pure speed. So this seems to give Sonic a new push of motivation as he thinks to himself, I'm definitely going to surpass you with my own power. He tells Flashy Flash to get up, and in an instant they go right for Empty Void and try to double team him. Well, Empty Void just does his little foo anime villain laugh, and he says, all this zest is nice and all, but do you think your situation's gotten any better? And as Flashy Flash and Sonic lunge at Empty Void, he reminds them how much faster he is than both of them, when he very easily gets behind them and gets ready to slash them both. So at this moment, Sonic and Flashy Flash are about to be goners, but thankfully the Giga Chad himself, Blast, shows up at the very last second, and we get this awesome panel where he appears right behind Empty Void, looking all big and ominous, and you can just tell by the look on Empty Void's face that he immediately immediately knew who it was behind him. A second ago, the dude was all smiling and smug about to kill Sonic and Flashy Flash, and just like that, in a split second, Blast has this guy shitting his pants. Just goes to show the difference in power between Blast and even somebody as strong as Empty Void. So for those of you that were heavily anticipating the reunion between Blast and Empty Void, here you go, we're finally getting it. What's super exciting about this is that we might get some kind of flashback between Blast and Empty Void, showing us the events that led up to him transforming into a monster, maybe him discovering a God Cube and revealing some secret about God we've never heard of before. Because for someone that has a gateway that leads straight to God, I'm sure that God has some kind of special relationship with Empty Void that he doesn't have with any of his other avatars. And the reason I'm heavily banking on this flashback here is because I'm hoping that it clears up some mysteries and questions that I have. The prime one being when we get that flashback from Sitch that showed us Blast's journey leading up to a few years ago when he met God for the very first time. Unfortunately, we don't get any type of showdown or epic battle there. We just go from him looking up at God super surprised, and then randomly cut away to him in front of Sitch badly injured. The thing that always stuck out to me when we first saw this sequence, since God is this massive behemoth of a being, I found it hard to believe that he'd be able to do the type of damage to Blast that he had. If you look closely, it looks like Blast has slashes all over his body. It definitely seems like injuries that were made by a sword of some kind, or at least the type of injuries that would come from a human or a human-sized figure, which led me to believe that at some point Empty Void intervened in this very moment, and maybe this is when he first became a monster, or when he comes face to face with Blast, he gets some kind of temporary buff from God to help him deal the amount of damage that he did to Blast, or Blast just simply refused to fight him the first time around because he was his friend. Not entirely sure, but getting back to the chapter, well, Blast just looks at him and says, "Yo partner, you look well." And Empty Void looks back at him and is about to say his name, but Blast doesn't even give him any time to do that because he nails him right in the face with a gravity knuckle. So it looks like next chapter we're about to see Blast versus Empty Void going all out. Hopefully this time around Empty Void has some kind of power up that Blast doesn't know about, so that way the fight is much more even and enjoyable. But if nothing else, and this is a weird thing for me to say because this is probably something I have never said before, please for the love of God, make sure that Saitama does not join this fight. If you're a webcomic reader, you know exactly how the fight between Empty Void and Saitama is going to go. Dude is just going to get off panel one shot, and that's something I really don't want to happen. I want to see more of Empty Void's powers and see what more he can do. And on top of that, the guy has a portal that leads straight to God. So it's almost guaranteed that he has some form of super valuable information to give to the heroes. But maybe that's just wishful thinking. I don't know. Let me know what you thought about this chapter in the comments though. Appreciate you all hopping in to check this chapter out with me. That is it for this one though. Have an absolutely wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, whatever. And I'll see you guys in the next video.